I got home last night and I had a package on my doorstep, and it was from Green Chef, who are my sponsors for this series. I was absolutely blown away with what was inside. Not only did they have the step-by-step recipe cards in there, but they had all the ingredients and as fresh as you can get them. Last night, I cooked the duck in balsamic glaze, which I'd never tried before. These pre-portioned ingredients allowed me to try this new flavour completely risk-free, and I was able to eat the exact right amount of these ingredients. Not only that, but they had tender stem broccoli. How many other food boxes send tender stem broccoli? It was unbelievably delicious, and I can't recommend it enough. Their high-quality, fresh, seasonal ingredients just blew me away. And it's allowed me to eat consistently and have a routine whilst eating healthily. So get 40% off your first box and 20% off your next 3 boxes with the code GREENSTRONG. That's GREENSTRONG for 40% off your first box and 20% off your next 3 boxes. Welcome to another episode of Headstrong Season 7. My name is Louis Strong and I am the host of this podcast. Headstrong is a podcast where I sit down with a number of individuals in the public eye to talk to them about their lives and their careers and their experiences to understand what the word headstrong means to them. And to me, it means to believe in yourself, to talk about your vulnerabilities and reinforce your self-worth. Joining me on this episode of Headstrong is former Love Island contestant Sharon Gaffka. I spoke to Sharon about her experience on the show and indeed what fame is like and how she has tackled social media and the woes that come with it. So I really hope you enjoy this episode of Headstrong. Okay, awesome. Sharon, thank you very much for joining me on Headstrong. How's it going?
It's been good. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you for asking. We were just, before we were recording, having a chat about Christmas and the stresses of adulthood. Do you feel like adulthood's really hit you on the head now?
Do you know what? I feel like it's hit me on the head a long time ago, but I think now I am having to accept it more than I did before. I feel like I could just pie it off a little bit and play it down, but yeah, it's fully on. Like a train right now.
yeah, we're on the move. So, as we were saying, this podcast is rooted in mental health, and I kind of wanted you to come on because I feel like that you've got quite a lot to say in that kind of capacity on various things, from your background, your strong background in business, your stint on Love Island, and then your experiences with that, and kind of what you do now as well as an ambassador for various things. So to start at the very beginning, when I was doing the prep for this episode, I was reading about beauty pageants. Now, forgive me for my lack of knowledge on beauty pageants. It's not my area of expertise, so I wouldn't be doing that on Mastermind. Can you fill me in? Well, how does what takes place at a beauty pageant? How old were you? How old do you have to be to enter these kind of things as well?
So I think in terms of like age, it can pretty much be any age. It very much depends on the competition. So I started when I was 14, 15. I mean, again, it depends on what competition you enter, but all the ones I've entered is very much focused on community work, self-development, charity aspect as well. So all of the pageants I've kind of worked with have been fundraising for young children hospices, anything relating to cancer. So the Christie up in Manchester. So it's a lot of emphasis on that and a lot of emphasis on self-development, and the interview tending, like, so it's an interview round that tended to be the heaviest portion of the competition. So your ability to speak, how you hold yourself in a conversation, how you can deal with pressure, basically, because a lot of the pageants I've entered, it's about more of an ambassadorship role. Especially when I won Miss International UK going to Japan, it's how you can hold yourself in a tough situation like an international competition. Obviously there's the on-stage proportions like the swimwear and the gowns and all of that stuff, and that tends to be where everyone focuses their attention when they think about beauty pageants. It's the swimwear and the gowns, but Yeah, it's an interesting hobby, I think.
Do you think they're portrayed in the wrong way then?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I do understand where the misconception comes from. I do find that in Britain, most of the misconception about beauty pageants is from programs like Honey Boo Boo Child, the young glitz pageants. I personally don't agree with glitz pageants because they are very, in my mind, superficial, where young girls are wearing like clip-in veneers or fake hair or whatever. But in terms of pageants I've done as a young woman, as a teenager, they're very much focused on what the community can do for young women, and painting teenagers in a good light. So I remember entering Miss Teen Great Britain in 2013, and the director started it up because teenagers were getting bad backlash from media for being jobs, for being antisocial, whereas she wanted to give teenagers a really good area to like kind of take a step back from that and have a good positive impact on their community. So yeah, I think it very much varies, but I think, people that have negative opinions on it that don't want to look at the positives of what a beauty pageant can do for somebody.
Yeah, it sounds like they can be an opportunity to represent the community almost and show what you can do within the community, which sounds like a really beneficial thing. So going from that, then you talk about the interview. What kind of questions would be asked in an interview?
I mean, it very much varies. It very much varies on age. I do feel like when they believe that you're a strong contender to take the competition, the questions get harder.
Oh, really?
So I remember, I don't remember exactly the questions, but I remember my last pageant interview being very, very tough. I remember the director of the pageant asking me, oh, because you have a really good job and a really good career, why do you want to waste your time doing beauty pageants? And I remember sitting there being like, wow, okay, like this woman's really testing the water with me. And she really tested my like opinion on beauty pageants and why I was there and what my purpose of my life is. So yeah, I remember leaving, even though it was like 5 minutes, I remember it being like one of the hardest 5 minutes of my life.
So job interviews sound like a piece of cake to you then?
Oh yeah, do you know what, actually, I do find that job interviews, I feel, come easier to me now as years of beauty pageant interview experience have happened.
I really enjoy a job interview. I think it's a great time. I don't understand people who get really nervous about them because that person probably wants you to succeed. They don't want to watch you flop or fall or fail in that role. So you've just got to accept that even if there's another however many people going up for it, it's not a failure. You've done well enough that they want you to interview, I suppose.
Yeah, I agree. And for me, it's always been a bit more of a conversation as opposed to, I think of it as a conversation as opposed to an interview.
Well, 100%. So can you remember the first job that you had when you were younger?
Okay. So the first actual job I had when I was younger, so obviously I did the paper rounds and stuff like that. I worked at McDonald's as my first job.
Did you?
Yeah, I mean, do you know what? It was really funny leaving the villa. It was one of those stories that came out about me that made the Sun, and I was like, why is that an art? Like, why is that a story? I never pretended that I didn't work there. Like, it's part of my life. It's part of my journey. Yeah, I spent the first year of my career in working in my local McDonald's.
So you know all the trade secrets.
Yeah, something like that. I think it actually was at the same time the horse meat scandal came out. So people were asking me about what the meat was, and I was like, oh, do you know what? I think McDonald's is probably one of the few places where it's actually what it says on the tin. Like, it's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So, how did your McDonald's career then transition further on, and then I don't know how many years later it was where you're finding yourself working as part of the government. You're a civil servant. How did these opportunities come around? Tell me that narrative.
Do you know what, actually? I worked at McDonald's when I was 16. I had my first government job at 18. So it wasn't very long between the two. But I think one of the things that I learned at McDonald's is how to treat people and how not to treat people. I think that people forget, like, I think it was mainly customers forget that a lot of people that are in McDonald's are either, students, are people in difficult positions. They're people that just want a job, basically, and they forget that they are human, and assume that because they're in a fast food restaurant that they're stupid or whatever. And actually, I know that's not the case. But it taught me a lot how to treat people that I work with, how to employees, how employers shouldn't treat people, because I saw firsthand how it was making people feel, like really poor level management. And generally about what good culture can do in terms of like KPIs and how well you can succeed as a business. I ended up being a manager at Co-op, which was my second job after. And then I took what I learned and like just basically made everyone feel human. And I do that now when I go to job interviews and I sit there and they're like, what? I was like, well, I can't tell you what I can do with this job. I can humanize the role you've given me on a piece of paper. I think there's one thing that I'm really good at, and it's managing expectations of people and managing people. And that's why I've always been successful in my career. And I do take that from learning while working at McDonald's.
Yeah, that's a really good point of just making sure that somebody just doesn't feel intimidated by managerial roles as well, and management. I think that's something that's really important. But the way you talk about it, absolutely, I completely agree. Now, going into that role at 18, was that a leadership position then?
No, it wasn't. So I was probably mid-management level. I didn't have any particular line management experience until maybe 2-3 years into my career.
So something I wanted to ask you is your experiences with discrimination in the workplace, and if you had any notable instances where that occurred.
Yeah, I actually do think it happened as an apprentice. So I joined the government as an apprentice at age 18. I do feel like, I mean, it wasn't specifically like racism or sexism, but I do remember feeling like my age was being taken into consideration a lot. And I do think because of my appearance, like I was just one of those, because I was 18, I wanted to make a really good impression. I was one of those girls that I'd made sure I'd got up every morning, did my hair, did my makeup, because I wanted to impress people I was working with. And I cared so much about what I looked like just as much as my job. I think that maybe some of the people that I worked to didn't like that. And I remember one particular woman, she just didn't take well to me. She would make digs at my appearance. She would make digs at my age consistently. And I remember times in my apprenticeship where I wanted to quit because of how this one person was making me feel. And, I felt like I was nobody and I felt like I was useless, but I had to keep reminding myself, 6,500 people applied for these jobs and only 600 people got them. And I got here for a reason, and it wasn't because of the makeup I was wearing. So I just had to bite the bullet and deal with it for 2 years. And it wasn't until people started to notice her behavior around me that I wasn't the only person she did it to. So I don't know what it is about that person, because the other person that it happened to was substantially older than me, didn't look like me. So I just don't know. I think it was one of those things I had to overcome, and it does take a type of person to be able to deal with that. And I look back at it, I should never have had to. I should never have sat there in silence and just took the backhanded comments that she was making to me.
Well, this is a really important thing to talk about, actually, because in the workplace, I feel like a lot of people are very reluctant and scared to speak to someone in the senior about how they're feeling or being made to feel by somebody else. What would you say about that then? Because I feel like there's not a comfortable atmosphere for that to happen. Maybe it's actually from the self of the apprehension, the anxieties that might be the what ifs, what happens, because naturally as a human we'll think of the worst that's going to happen when actually it's probably never going to be that severe. So what can we do to combat that?
I feel like it should be more that the employers give employees safe spaces to talk about their feelings. I do find that actually when people started to set up forums and like reward and recognition schemes and all these things, that you could actually see people's, like, if you feel appreciated, you'll work harder than your salary allows you to. Like, every time I felt appreciated, I definitely gone on above and beyond. So it was little things like that. But
what is the safe space then?
I mean,
is it giving an opportunity each week or each month, or allowing check-in times, or I don't know. I mean, there's no right or wrong answer. I'm just wondering what your opinion is.
Yeah, I think for me, when I took on management position, my idea of creating a safe space was like taking lead. So like if I felt like I needed a mental health day, I would tell my team that, or I would lead by example. Like if I need a break, I said I need 5 minutes, or like, I'm having a bad day, I would talk to people that I managed about it, because then they feel like if I can do that to them, then they can easily confide in me and do the same thing. Like I've never had any issues where someone I've managed has come to me and said, look, I need a mental health day. because if I've done it, they feel like they can do the same thing. So I think it is leadership working downwards and taking a lead by example, and not just saying, oh, we're doing this, and then never doing it themselves. I actually find it very, it's very common in British culture, I think, that whole stiff upper lip where we don't take our own advice. So that was my idea of creating a safe space.
Yeah, I think that's something that I'm really keen to show to anybody by this platform, is that vulnerability is a strength. And actually, it's very normal as well to show that vulnerability, because if you denormalize it altogether, how does anyone, any innocent individual go about their lives when they know full well that you will on every now and then? Brad Pitt probably does every now and then. He'll have a terrible day, but everyone does, and it's just part of normal life. So we can't take that away.
Yeah, no, definitely, I agree. And I think, it was probably one of the bits that I found more successful in my time managing teams, because it felt like people could come to me, like, people who I didn't even manage felt like they could come to me about problems, and it meant things got resolved a lot quicker. And I had a happy team, and it meant that having a happy team meant that my actual job was a lot easier.
So there came a point in your life then where that was going to be put behind you. Well, not necessarily put behind you. You never know. You never say never. But what was the timing then in your life? Because you were in management position, and you were, it's fair to say, you're in a great job, and you were still young. You were 24, 25.
Yeah.
Then you applied for Love Island, I suppose, or were you scouted?
I applied. So
you applied for it. So you consciously wanted to go on the show. So what was the motivation and thought process at yourself? Was it a single motivation, or were there a variety of factors?
Do you know what? I feel like there was a variety of factors, in a sense that my friends and I always made jokes about me applying for the show, because I was the only single friend, and they were all living vicariously through me with all of my weird escapades in terms of modern dating. But I feel I did see something on Instagram earlier, and I feel like it's definitely it became a realization to me. That's why I applied for Love Island, and it was that I'd spent so much of my young life working. How do I press undo? And it's like, it gets to a point where you get responsibilities, and going off and doing something as crazy as Love Island, or just taking yourself off for traveling, becomes impossible. Like when you get to the age where you have a mortgage and you have kids and all of that stuff, you can't do those things anymore. And I was like, well, I don't want to get to 30, 40, and I never went on a girls' holiday when I was younger. I never did the whole gap, because I didn't go to uni, I didn't do gap years, I didn't go traveling. So I'd missed out on those rites of passage. And COVID made me have that massive realization that, had I died when I caught COVID, I would have done nothing in my 20s but work, and have no exciting stories to tell people. And it's a pretty bleak way to look at it, but I just wanted to do something that was different, something that was fun, that would kind of make me feel like I was in my early 20s again. It's a very extreme way to go about it, but it definitely worked.
No, I completely agree. I feel actually that kind of attitude is quite overlooked now, because everyone expects the best job, expects the best salary, and to get there you have to work constantly, and nothing's given to you anymore because the life is so competitive, when actually we're only put here once, and actually you're here to just have a good time. Not as broad as that, but do you know what I mean? It's ultimately money's a construct, time is a construct, but we all know that we're only here once, so you might as well make the most of it.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think it's all about balance. Everyone thinks that when they be in an X position with an X amount of salary, they'd be happy. Well, I got there before I was 30, and I wasn't. So that says a lot about what people's perception of money and salary and position is, when actually it's not all it is cracked up to be. And I wanted to do something different, and yeah, here I am. Did
you have any apprehension before going on? So let's say you've got it. Did you have any apprehension?
Of course I did. I think my parents don't watch reality TV, had no idea what Love Island was, and culturally, I think it's quite well known that I have quite a mixed heritage. So having both foreign parents, like, how well were they going to perceive that I was leaving my job, regardless of how temporary it is, to go on reality TV? was scary, whether it would impact future prospects if I wanted to return back to my job, how people would perceive me. I'm not in control of what gets shown. And do you know what? I think my job made me more conscious about what I was doing and how I was being perceived, just because it's part of my job to look at the bigger picture before I act. So yeah, I mean, there was lots of apprehension, but then again, I had this thing in my head that was like, do you know what? How many people have applied for the show? How many people have been offered this opportunity? And this opportunity will never come by again. If I change my mind after this series is gone, will the show still be there next year? Will I be offered to go back on the show next year? Probably not. So it's now or it's never.
Since the show has gone through, since it was kind of started through to the last series as well, this is more of a broad question, because obviously I know your motivations for doing so. But do you think other people's motivations for applying for the show are actually in the wrong place?
I don't think so at all. I think, you know, whatever reasons you have for going on the show, I don't think it's a bad thing or it's negative. Like, if you wanted to go on there because you wanted whatever brand deal, or you wanted to become whatever, like, I think it's a really good way to go about it. Where I do find it to be quite negative is that, because it is a dating show, if somebody goes on there for the sole intentions of potentially meeting someone and they couple up with somebody who has a very different intention, your feelings could be very much led along for, I know it's only 8 weeks, but 8 weeks when you live with someone 24 hours a day and you have no other escape is a very long time. I feel like that's the only negative about it. Well, actually, it's one of the negatives about it. I think the other negative is that you're not guaranteed to leave famous. You're not guaranteed to leave with X amount of followers. You're not guaranteed to leave with X deals. So if you put all your eggs in one basket, I also think that's a massive negative, because you're not guaranteed any of these things.
Absolutely. Now, was the show what you expected it to be? Did it live up to expectations?
I mean, it was very interesting to learn the tricks of the trade.
Oh, really?
And how they do things. And for anyone that thinks that you just sit there in a lovely villa for 8 weeks and sunbathe, you are massively confused, because it is a lot harder and a lot more stressful than people think it is.
Are the producers quite hands-on then?
I would say, in terms of providing guidance, I'd say yes. You do get a lot of guidance and a lot of help with, because they're trying to construct a storyline at the end of the day, right? They've already started with what they've been given, and they're trying to work it out, and they're trying to use whatever their character they've made you into be to make a storyline to keep it entertaining. So there is that sense of guidance, but it was fun. Like, it definitely lived up to my expectations of making me like act like I was in my 20s as opposed to acting like I was in my 50s.
I've got to ask you, do you think that it's time for the opportunity for a more diverse cast, in the sense of same-sex relationships and opening the door in a variety of ways like that?
Yeah, 100%. You know, I remember speaking on interviews and other podcasts where I said that, you know, one of the reasons why I really thought about going on there in the first place, I thought more about how me going on there would increase representation than what brand deals I could get out of it. You know, going on as a Asian bisexual woman from a mixed heritage, how many people do I represent going on that show that probably haven't been, like, don't look at reality TV and feel they're represented anymore? I do think, you know, even if they don't think it will work in terms of the structure now, a queer Love Island of any way, shape or form, I think it's very much time to have one. Yeah, like, I think it would be more entertaining, if anything.
Oh, I can only imagine. I reckon it would be.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, not only would you increase representation, you'd also increase, you know, entertainment value. But I think for me, that I don't think they've necessarily tried as hard as they can, but I can see, like, this series, they have tried to increase representation. Obviously, this year had a lot more Asian contestants than previous series, but I did say in another interview that it's all well and good increasing representation, but if nobody is attracted to that diversity you've put in, then you've defeated the purpose of the diversity.
No,
so it's all, yeah, like, if you put like a different race of guys in, but all the girls only fancy one type of race. It's just a bit, it defeats the objective. So I feel like the diversity in a whole needs to be like, it doesn't need to just be characteristics, it needs to be relationships as well, like how people find relationships,
different dynamics as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that would also make the show more interesting, because I remember sitting there being like, well, I don't fancy any of these boys. Like none of them are for me. And I remember telling a producer, like, if you want me to fight for a boy, you need to give me a boy worth fighting for. Because in real life, I would never date any of them. Like, it sounds bad, and like it's weird because one of the trolling things I got was, oh, nobody fancied you, but it's like, well, hang on, what if I didn't fancy them?
And you went, not worried, actually.
Yeah, I like when there was this whole storyline that apparently I smiled when I thought Danny was going to pick me, when actually Danny is 100% not my type, and I would happily have left that villa than couple up with him. So yeah, for like me, I was just like, oh, okay, like it felt like it defeated the point of me being there. If nobody fancies girls that are Asian or like me at all.
So this is something that I'm really keen to talk to you about after a couple of years after. So I spoke to Dr. Alex when he came out of the villa, and then I spoke to Laura Crane as well about it. And I'm interested to talk to you as a more recent contestant and with more recent developments on the support on leaving the villa. And I wanted to know what was put in place by the production company and indeed ITV for your support and mental well-being upon leaving the villa, and how long that subsequently lasted, and if it's ongoing or that's kind of it.
I do feel like that the welfare provided to you, I mean, to provide it to us this series has been really substantial. Obviously, we've unfortunately lost more people since some of the other series. Like we recently lost Caroline Flack, which was really hard, and I think I hit ITV production really hard as well. So you know, I can't speak for other contestants in previous series, but even going through the process to get onto the show was pretty brutal in terms of mental health screenings. You had therapy before you even went on the show. There was a therapist in Mallorca. I mean, we couldn't see them because obviously it was a COVID-free zone. They were available on Zoom, but they were in Mallorca if we needed them. There was welfare out on the outskirts of the villa. And, you know, even physically, like I remember in the villa, like I was cutting a mango for Toby and I'd accidentally like nipped myself. But obviously I forget that I'm wearing this microphone 24/7, and I had about 17 plasters delivered to me. But all I did was nip my finger. So, you know, I feel like they were paying a lot of attention to you while you were in there. In terms of leaving, you know, I've heard Molly and Tommy make jokes about it, but I feel like it too. They phone you so much.
Oh, really?
I have had non-stop contact with welfare, not in a negative way. Like they are on
just
it.
like
They're
checkups.
very on it. Yeah, like, you know, even having weird conversations. I remember speaking to them about Winter Wonderland, like about all these random things. And it's like speaking to a friend. Like I would text them like I would text my mate. In terms of like actual physical, like CBT, I mean, I had a CBT session this morning. So for me, like therapy and all that stuff is still very much ongoing. And I feel like, I mean, you're given an X amount of sessions when you leave the villa, but if you want more, it's down to at the discretion of you and the production team.
Okay, so it sounds like there's a lot in place for like for enough support to be there for nothing to go wrong, so to say. Okay, but that's really important. I know. You know what I'm trying to say there. It's just important to have that support, and it sounds like that they're checking up on you in more ways than one, which is important. And I imagine as well that you've kind of, depending on the series, rally around each other as well.
Yeah, definitely. Like, you know, despite whatever's happened in whatever series and anything, like people come out and, you know, you're not always going to be friends with everyone. But if any of the Islanders from whatever series, especially, you know, the ones that I've lived with, messaged me and phoned me and reached out to me and said they've got a problem, I would always be there to listen, regardless of what our relationship was or is. And it's, you know, I think it's one of those things that I've loved about Islanders since I left, is that because this is a very unique experience and not everyone gets to understand, you're in the same boat and everyone is always helpful, regardless of whether you actually like each other or not.
Absolutely. So in another breath then, something that comes with Love Island, as we all know, it to a varied degree for any individual that goes on the show, is the fame and that side of it and the catapult into the spotlight. So let's talk about that with you. Before you went in, would you say you were quite a stable individual? like mentally.
Yeah, definitely.
So when you came out of the villa, you had thousands, hundreds of thousands of Instagram followers. Was that overwhelming for you, Eve, despite being mentally strong?
I think it was weird at first. This series we were in a unique situation that when I came out, I had to quarantine. I think a lot of people, when they leave the villa, they fly back to UK and then they live life. So they're like instantly catapulted into like people. Whereas I was catapulted into my phone because I lived on my own.
Yeah,
I had 5 days of nothing but my phone. I mean, when you first look at it, I left with 200 and something thousand followers. I looked at it and I was like, oh, it's not that much. It's fine. But when you think about it, if I stood in a room of 200 and something thousand people, I'd be like, bloody hell, this is ridiculous. Like, so it's weird at first. I didn't pay it any mind and any attention, but the 5 days where I sat there and I had nothing but my phone, it started to I think it breaks you down a little bit. You become like easily susceptible to reading everything you've been sent or reading everyone's comments or reading opinions about you. So like it's being outside in the real world for the first time is very different to being in your phone. So I think that's where maybe I found it harder than some of the other individuals that would have left pre-COVID.
How's social media impacted your kind of day-to-day life then? And are you also in tune with what you do and don't read? I imagine you've learned since leaving that it's probably better on what you know you can manage and can't manage. Yeah,
I mean, I hate to say it, I feel like I've spent more time on social, obviously jobs change and things. I definitely spend more time on social media than I normally would. I definitely, in terms of comments and things, I mean, I know not to read anything that comes out of the Sun. I learned that the hard way. It's not ever, I don't think I've ever read a pleasant story about any of the islanders from the Sun. That's really hard to say. I know that if I get sent a link from an article from the Daily Mail, it's going to be something about my body. So I just don't read that, and definitely never read a comment from a Daily Mail reader, ever.
Oh,
my dad's
brutal.
Retired. Yeah, my dad's retired, so he has nothing better to do but troll trolls. So he once told me, he told me about a comment. I was like, don't tell me about it. I don't want to hear about it. I deliberately don't read it. He was like, oh, well, a troll had commented on it, on quite a transphobic comment on an article about me. My dad was like, well, ironically, the idiot left his address on the comment.
What?
So it was normally it would be Dawn from Kent, but this person had had their name and a specific street in the northwest.
Impressive level of incompetency, that.
Yeah, definitely. So if I was one of those people that I'd read those things, I could easily go find them. I never will because I'm not to their level. But yeah, I definitely learnt the hard way to read less.
Sure.
And I'm
Is there anything specific that you can recall?
I mean, I remember the Sun writing an article about me, called me a catfish. And, they claiming that I'd over-edited my photo. And actually, in reality, the lighting was different because I was in a dark restaurant. I'd had professional hair and makeup, and I wasn't the one that took the photo. So to claim that I was overly edited and don't look like me, or I'm a catfish because I don't look how I looked in the villa, when actually you forget that photos and things are...
Sorry.
Sorry, I've got a dog, so I completely understand. Photos and things, when someone takes photo on social media, it's posed. I always get my best angle. On TV, I've never got my best angle. Also, heat, all of those random things, I'm never going to look how I look on TV. People have seen me in real life don't even know that I look like I look on TV. So yeah, I think the turning point and where I learned that I should no longer read everything that comes out about me.
Mm.
And I got into a dangerous habit of when I first left the villa of Googling myself. And that's dangerous. That's a dangerous path to go down.
Can I ask you, I can obviously understand the core reason why, but what were you kind of seeking to see? Because you were doing it probably for a reason, just to see something, but did you know what you wanted to see?
I mean, I started doing loads of really amazing things. So, I wrote an article for Grazia about trolling. I did one about spiking. So I was hoping that there'd be more traction about the things that were really important to me, the things that I thought were beneficial to people. So I was hoping that if I typed my name into Google, that all of these things would come at the top, when inevitably they don't. So yeah, I think I was excited because loads of girls have been messaging me about saying that things that I'd written were really helpful to them and it made them feel better. So I was like, oh, I want to see how they found it. And then I met with articles about my body, about my face, about my appearance, about relationships that don't exist, and all these things. So yeah, I feel like I was looking for like some sort of gratification that like I'd written
of the
something
hard
worthwhile.
work that you do.
Yeah, definitely.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, that it's something that I want to talk about. Well, I'll come on to it in a little bit if that's okay, because you briefly touched on your family there. So it sounds like that you've got a real support bubble around you. Just so if you ever have any wobbles or any kind of issue, I feel like you are comfortable leaning on your close family. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, definitely. I've definitely got the best circle around me that I could possibly ask for.
How important is that then when you leave somewhere like Love Island?
Do you know what I find? And I feel like a lot of Islanders can agree with me. When you leave something like that, there'll be a lot of people that you don't speak to anymore that try and tell stories on you. There'll be people that try and I had loads of people that I haven't seen since I was 16, 18, make false stories and accusations about me. People that used to say less pleasant things about me before I went on TV, try and become my friend.
Yeah, that's what I can imagine a lot of fake friendship, me popping back up into your life and going, oh my God, that's so cool. Well done. Should we meet up?
Yeah, I had so much from that from people that used to say horrible things about me that were like hated me for whatever reason. And I like having a close-knit circle that you can trust that you had before the show is so important to keep when you leave. Because they will never, they don't see me as Sharon from Love Island. They see me as Sharon, their sister, their daughter, their best friend. And I will never, they're people that I want to keep for the rest of my life. So, yeah, I don't think I could Love Island or get through how difficult it is now without them.
So we touched on social media as well. And I know these are a lot of repetitive questions in a way, slightly phrased differently that you've most definitely answered in your time before. But with social media, how conscious are you of what you specifically post to post? Because your audience is young, right? And a lot
of course.
The Love Island and Islanders Instagram followers are young, and therefore you are, of course, incredibly influential to these people. Are you conscious of what you do and don't post in what kind of to show your followers?
Yeah, of course I am. I feel like I'd be very hypocritical if I didn't, because I'm very open about a lot of things. I've been very open about cosmetic procedures and things like that because I don't want people to look at me and think, well, I mean, I haven't had a lot of work done contrary to popular belief, but I still don't want to lie about it, because I remember when one of the Jenner sisters started to have work done and she claimed it was completely natural, it was a result of the pill, and all of these younger girls, including myself, were sitting there thinking, well, why don't I look like that? Why didn't the pill make me look like this? So if I'm completely open and transparent with it, then no one else
can feel the same way. It's a realistic version, and yeah, sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a catch-22 because I don't want to be seen like I'm encouraging whatever to young girls, and I'm very open and honest about the negatives and the downsides of whatever you decide to do as well. But I post a lot of filter-free photos, a lot of photos of me with no makeup, even if it makes the Sun write articles and call me a catfish, whatever. Obviously I do look different with and without makeup, but I post a lot of for me, educational stuff. I talk a lot about women and careers. I started a blog to write about politics and things like imposter syndrome and loads of questions that people have actually asked me about that I think can be beneficial. And at the moment I'm doing a lot about, things that are really important, things I want to change. So I don't want my Instagram or me as a person to just be about pretty pictures. And equally, I've turned down a lot of paid jobs because I don't see them to fit my brand. So I could sit here and make a lot of money and sell all kinds of rubbish to all kinds of young girls, but equally that's very off-brand for me and I'm not interested.
Yeah, sure. It's kind of against your own moral integrity.
Yeah, definitely. And I didn't go on the show to make money, so why would I all of a sudden change my mind now that I've left the show? So yeah, for me, I'm very conscious about what I'm posting, and if I'm unsure about something, I will speak to someone about it first.
Well, I have no doubt, and as you are already proving, there is ways to make money ethically and appropriately.
Yeah, definitely. And if you do something that sticks to your moral standards, I have people tell me this a lot of the time because I'm I was like, well, if I post more, like when I post a pretty picture, I get more followers, I get more engagement than when I post something that's really substantial. But then, you know, my team always remind me, well, if you post that substantial stuff, you'll have a bigger career in the long run. So that longevity. And like, you know, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So all of these people that get high engagement now, when all the pretty pictures runs out and they've done all the brand deals, what do they do then?
You're a businesswoman, that's what.
I'd like to think so, but my dad would laugh if he heard you say that.
Well, if he's got so much time, he can be one of the first listeners then. So I obviously, in preparation for this, I've had a look at all the work and amazing work that you do. And I want to talk to you about the Young Women's Trust. And I want to talk about the specific work that you do. So I want to give you a chance to kind of tell me and educate me on the important work that they do.
Yeah, I mean, the Young Women's Trust is obviously a female organisation that focuses on the economic empowerment of young women. It kind of divides itself into 4 sections, and it mainly focuses on women that are carers, ensuring that women that, you know, I think it's fair game that apprentices earn, like, it's not fair game, it's well known that apprentices earn a lot less money, but most of the time now apprentices tend to be older with the same responsibilities as somebody who's not an apprentice. So it's about finding like ways for equal salary to take women out of this horrible circle you find yourself in once you fall into kind of like the welfare trap. And also it focuses on like they have a program called Work It Out, where they do a lot of CV and empowerment workshops to help women get back into work, especially young mothers. So in terms of work that I did, actually, they found me as a result of beauty pageants. I'd come back from Japan after spending 5 weeks in Japan as Miss International UK. I was already a sponsor of the charity, so I donated, I think it was £5 every month to the organisation. Obviously, the social media team had gone through people that donate and found me on there. When I came back from Japan, I was an ambassador for violence against women in Japan, ending violence against women. And obviously having a career in government, like I found all these people looking at my LinkedIn. I was like, what's going on? But so yeah, it kind of started up there as an ambassadorship role, kind of like sharing stuff, helping them with their campaigns. I remember one International Women's Day, they did a calculator to work out how much unpaid work women contribute to the economy every year. And they went to Parliament Square and they held up big signs in front of the Houses of Parliament and had loads of fake money and all these things. But for me now, it's about trying to figure out what my platform can do for them now, how I can benefit them in an ambassadorship role. And I feel like the drive for me is very much focusing on, I mean, I was once a young carer, but for me, it's now focusing on apprenticeships. I find that schools focus more on pushing people into university when I don't think it's beneficial to them in the long term. And I'm one of those people, I'm very much evidence that that's factual. So yeah, I want to, in the long term, help young women get back to work, find something they want to do, but also help them earn while they're learning, and help create a better future for a lot of young women.
It's amazing. And so in that same breath then, maybe you're not even allowed to talk about it, but where do you envision that going as you as a brand, but in what you can help do?
Yeah, I think for me, like, I actually want to take on a full-time role within a female organisation, whether that's being on the board of trustees and helping them guide them through their social media usage and their social media platforms and how to outreach with their influencers. Because Young Women's Trust do have an influencer program, but I feel like there is ways where we can strengthen that. And like, you know, I did say to them one day that I can see myself being their CEO. So, you know, loads of people, I've had trolling comments where people are like, you just want to be Molly May. And it's like, yeah, well, she wants to be CEO of Pretty Little Thing. I want to be CEO of the Young Women's Trust. It's very different. So yeah, one day I feel like that's my long-term goal, to be like a CEO of a female organisation.
I think that's a really good goal to have. I mean, yeah, and as you say, completely different and a stark contrast to Pretty Little Thing.
Yeah,
there's a number of things that you've obviously been outspoken on, and I've read that. I remember when they came out as well, but when you were spiked, because that's difficult to read. Because I got a younger sister who is now living in London, and if I found that out about her, I would, you know, I don't know how I would react, to be honest with you. But I mean, I don't know where to begin on this kind of conversation. First of all, let's talk about you and your emotions thereafter, because has it affected your experiences mentally in the long term?
I mean, do you know what? I feel like it hasn't, only because it's not the first time it happened to me. I can probably say on 5, 6 occasions I've been spiked in my adult life, and there were times where I feel like you blame yourself first. What could I have done to stop this happening to me? What did I do to make myself a victim of this? And I feel like a lot of young women that I've spoken to and that have reached out to me also have the same fear, where they're like, what did I do to make this happen? But that's the reason why I wanted to write this article. That's why the reasons why I wanted to get involved with the Girls Night In boycott and all of the campaigns going around, and wanting to reach out to parliamentarians and the Home Affairs Committee, because there's nothing I did do. I didn't do anything, because I lived my life and it was somebody else's decision to do that to me. So, I do remember feeling anxiety, feeling low, feeling ashamed, embarrassed, because I felt like I wasn't believed by a lot of the establishments that are put up to protect people. And I do feel like there's a lot of victim shaming, and I want to stop that. And I want young girls and other victims to be able to come forward and say this happened to them without feeling shame. So, and I find that, it's weird to me to know that Love Islanders have a lot of influence on young people. So, like, knowing that I'm now doing something to help people like your younger sister in the long terms is amazing to me. So I'm just keeping that in mind when I think about how I feel when things like that have happened to me in the past.
I mean, it's just, I feel like it's an ever evolving conversation in that regard, but also the way in which it's now conducted. I mean, the fact that needles were being brought up, and the fact that that's even a thing, because for someone like you who's just said that it's happened 5 or 6 times, it's probably changed your habits to an extent on a night out, going, should I actually now be doing that? Or should I cover my drink? Or now I don't know. And if there are now needles involved, what do you do? Literally.
Yeah, I don't think there is a way to protect yourself from needles. I was spiked by a drink. So I can't even comprehend what it'd be like. But obviously with needles, there's other worries involved, like, is the needle clean? Like, has it been used before? All of these things that young girls now have to face when they're being spiked. But that's what I want to speak to parliamentarians about. Because when I was 18, I couldn't even get into a nightclub with chewing gum. So how are people managing to get through the door with needles in their pockets? Like, it's something I don't understand. And then it's also the weird conversations online. Like, since I did that article, and I've reacted and stitched TikToks of police officers arresting people for suspicion of spiking and things like that. And everyone, it's weird comments from young boys, young men that are like, oh, well, men get spiked too. Oh, well, this happens to men too. And I've never said it's just a female only problem, but when you look at the stats, it's substantially female victims. But even with male victims, it's always men that are the perpetrators, from stats I've seen. So, I'm trying to help educate people and change people's opinions. And that's where I also think the government could come in. We have PHSE and whatever, and they teach you about drugs and all of this stuff, but they don't teach you about safe sex, spiking, all of these other things that are just as important to life as what the effects of ketamine can do to you.
Oh, yeah. Do you know what? I was talking about that to somebody the other day, in the sense that I was not prepared. And this kind of does a full swing around to like adult life. I was not prepared for anything. Like, how to pay my taxes, no idea. How to pay my car insurance, don't know. You just get on with it. And I'm surprised that that's not like a module or like something that you do when you're leaving school. I don't know. I just thought that'd be quite an important thing. Just life lessons, and a variety of ones, like exactly where it might not seem relevant to you at the time, but spiking, you should know about it. And you need to know what the key, I'm not educated enough in the matter to talk about it, but what the signs to look for on various things. So I feel like, I don't know about you. What did you feel at school?
Do you know what, actually? I think this is probably why I feel like I did quite well in my career, like, despite not being the massive A-star student that people think I am, or think I was, is because my dad taught me those life skills. And I was like, well, this isn't going to help me. And my dad was like, trust me, when you get older, this will help you. Like, my dad taught me how to do taxes. He would make me do all his tax returns, like put all his things into spreadsheet. And I was like, I don't understand why I'm doing this. This is a weird way to earn pocket money. And he's like, no, in the future, like, you'll understand. So now I know how to do these things. Yeah, and I was at the time, I was thinking, you're a crazy old man. But but like he used to do weird things like that. Or like when I was younger, he'd teach me how to fill up petrol in his car. And then when I learned to drive, like, it was my friends will phone me and they're like, Tesco's petrol pump, be like, I don't have petrol in my car. Can you come show me? And I'm like, what on earth? Like, how do you not know how to do that? But it's because who teaches you all of these things? And I do find that there are a lot of things I feel like I learned in school that are just not appropriate to real life. And I do find that maybe that's where the education system does fail a lot of people and a lot of things.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd probably agree in some capacity to that, 100%. As we wind down, first of all, thank you for joining me. But I have a question that I ask every guest that comes on the show. What does the word headstrong mean to you?
The word headstrong means to me is knowing yourself, knowing who you are and what you stand for. Because I think if you fully know who you are as a person and what you provide to the world, no one can take that away from you, and no one can belittle you for that. And then you know what purpose you're serving to other people.
Fabulous. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for joining me on Headstrong.
Thank you so much to Sharon for joining me on Headstrong. I really appreciate her giving up her time to have a natter about all things mental health. If you've enjoyed this episode of the podcast, please do subscribe, share it with your friends, leave a review, a rating. Talking about the podcast really, really helps me. So it's always great to get the word out there. Make sure you do hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on another episode of Headstrong.